Well, gratitude day, everyone. I am happy you could be here. For those who know me, and actually for those who don't know me, I am Charles L. Ellis. I am here this morning with Dream Big Dreams. And I am happy today. I am excited because my guest today has helped me out tremendously with my dreams, with my big dreams. As a matter of fact, in the beginning, he was there. I actually used him as a coach. And man, my career, my goals, all of that has taken off. So right now, I can't really do the justice. So I'm gonna let my guest, Anthony Hamilton, introduce himself. Anthony, let everyone know who are you, what do you do, and why do you do it? Go ahead, let that fire loose.
Well, thanks so much, Charles. Thanks for that great buildup. I have to say that, yeah, I did meet you originally because I was doing some coaching with you. You contacted me some years ago. But the difference between you and a lot of my clients is that not only did you listen, but you took action, right? And I remember you were very impressed with the fact that I had written a book or a couple of books. And one of your big dreams was you wanted to write a book. So I encouraged you to do that. And, the next thing I knew, you had one book or two books or maybe more books now that you're using to further your business and your contacts and your influence and help people worldwide. So a lot of the credit goes to you, but certainly if you want me to give your listeners a little bit of background, my story, I guess, starts when I was 10 years old. I fell out of a tree. I was climbing a tree and I fell out and landed on my back, knocked the wind out of myself. And I had this experience, and the experience was like I was out of my body, floating above my body, looking down at myself at what seemed to be the age of about 35, 33 or so, right? And so when I sort of regained my consciousness, this dream or this experience was so vivid that it really set the direction for the rest of my life. And what I saw in that dream, I was 10 years old at the time, and I saw myself at 32, and I knew, right, that I was going to be writing, I was going to be traveling, I was going to be teaching, I was going to be helping people live more successful and happier lives. And I knew that I was going to be a university professor. I was going to be married to an Asian woman. All of this just kind of came to me in that flash of insight, right? But it really set the direction for the rest of my life, because what I started to do at that point was to investigate two things. One was reading a whole bunch of books on personal growth and expanding your consciousness to try and figure out what does it take to be successful? What is success and what does it take to be successful? Because that's what I saw in my dream, right? And the other thing was doing some research, and pretty intense research for about 20 years altogether, into how is it possible to get information from the future? Because that's what I thought happened to me. I got some message from the future, and so I wanted to find out how is that possible? Because as far as I was concerned, what I had learned was that we have information from the past, which we generally call memory, but we don't have any information from the future because the future hasn't happened yet. And so what I discovered after 20 years of research was that model of consciousness, that idea, that the past is something different from the future, and we have information from the past that affects us, and the information from the future, it's impossible to get because the future hasn't happened yet. I realized that that's completely wrong. That's based on a model of consciousness that really, I should say, it's based on a model of the physical world that was developed in the 17th century, most notably by a guy named Isaac Newton. But there were a lot of other people working on similar things, right? So the idea that the past somehow affects us, we have memory that gives us information about it, and the future, we don't have any information and we can't do anything about it, that's completely wrong. And so even though this idea of time and the mind has been around for about 300 years or so, it actually changed in 1904. So that's more than 100 years ago, when a guy named Albert Einstein came along and completely revolutionized Isaac Newton's idea of physics and said, the past and the future are actually both available. And one of the things he said, which really was kind of the icing on the cake for me when I was doing this research into the mind and time, and that was that the laws of time and the laws of space are the same. So he dismissed, or at least updated, Isaac Newton's idea that the physical world and the spiritual world, as he called it, by the word spirit, he really means the invisible world, are separate and they don't have any interaction. And Einstein said, basically, there is no time and there is no space. There's what he called space-time. So he said they're really the same kind of thing. And the laws of time and the laws of space are the same. So I realized, and this was about 20 years into this research project that I was talking about, that I had started when I was 10. And I realized, well, what's true about space? And what I realized was, well, one of the things that's true about space is that information travels through it. We have information right now from Mars, right? We have these robots and things crawling around on the surface of Mars, and they're sending us information. So we have a lot of information about Mars, even though we've never been there, because we have this thing that traveled to Mars and sends us information about what it picks up, right? And what I realized is that's exactly how the mind works. Like what we call memory, and what I had learned as a child was memory is a kind of a recording. I realized it's not a recording at all. There is no recording of the past in my mind someplace. What it is my consciousness has a little piece, kind of like this satellite or like this machine that goes to Mars. My consciousness has a little piece that I call my internal focus. And if I send my focus back to my past, like, for example, I can send it back to an hour ago when I was driving my wife to work, and I can remember, I get information, meaning images, sounds, pictures, memories, perceptions of what took place when I was driving my wife to work, right? Well, I can do the same thing in the future. I'm going to have a conference call with a few colleagues of mine in a couple of hours, and I can imagine what that's going to be like. It's going to be a Zoom call like this one. And, when I think about having that Zoom call with my friends in the future, I get information about that Zoom call that is going to be reasonably accurate. I have some ideas what we're going to talk about, but a lot of it I don't understand or I don't know, which is the same as the past, right? So when I think about driving my wife to work this morning, I think, oh, I know, that's a memory. I know all about that. I did that, right? But if you said to me, well, how many cars did you pass when you were driving to work? How many people were walking on the street that you drove past? Well, I don't know that, right? So the idea that we know the past and don't know the future It's completely wrong. And it's been, it's been updated by Einstein more than 100 years ago, 1904. And the truth is that we have in our mind something which I call your internal focus that you can send into the past. You can pick up information from the past and you can send it into the future and you can pick up information from the future. And that's what I experienced in that dream when I was 10 years old. And so that answered my question of how is it possible to get information from the future? And I realized we get information from the future all the time. As a matter of fact, that's what thinking is. Every thought that you have is an instance of time travel. Whether you're thinking about the past or thinking about the future, your mind is a part of your mind that's traveling in time, just like that robot is traveling on Mars and sending information to the present, which is where I am. My conscious mind is in the present. So we have two sets of senses. We have outer senses. I can look around my room here. I can see what's going on. I can hear you when you talk. And I have feelings about, the table that I'm sitting at and that sort of thing. So I have 5 senses that give me information about the present physical world. I also have 5 internal senses, which give me information about my internal world, which is the past or the future, or maybe a parallel reality, which is something that I can experience internally. And a parallel reality is just simply asking myself, well, what if, I look out my window here, the sun is shining and it's great. And I say to myself, well, what if it was raining? What would I see if it was raining? And immediately my mind gives me visual images of what I would see if it was raining, right? So the truth is that the past and the future are both the same in the sense that we have access to them both, so we have access to the present and the past and the future. And so that was how it's possible to get information from the future, because we get information from the future all the time anyway.
Okay.
And the other question was, what's the secret of success? Well, the secret of success is simply to understand this and to use your mind as a time machine to, first of all, design the future that you want in terms of your desires and your goals, right? And then to use your imagination to figure out what steps you need to take to get to the future that you want, right? And so I wrote this book, Mind, Time, and Power, which says you can heal your past, transform your present, create your future, which is what we all want to do, right? We either want to heal the past, transform the present, or create the future. And so that book I wrote that explains, number one, how the mind works and how it works as a time machine. And a large part of the book is how do you decide what you want? How do you set goals? How do you figure out plans and strategies for getting there? The same as I figure out my plan and my strategy for driving across town to take my wife to work, right? And so this was the first book that I ever heard about. And I was the first person that ever said, as far as I was aware, that the mind is a time machine, right? This was 1980 that I started to write this book. But here's another book. This is called The Yoga of Time Travel, right? Mm-hmm. This is written by a physicist here, Fred Alan Wolf. He's a world famous quantum physicist. And he explains that, your mind is a time machine. And not only is there a system and a series of techniques for using your mind as a time machine, but it's been around for thousands of years. Every time you imagine something, you're literally traveling in time, or at least a part of you is. This what I call your inner awareness, your inner focus, right?
Right.
So that's kind of a long-winded
but
answer,
you know what?
But
Anthony, let me interject here right quick, okay? Yeah. And the reason I'm doing it, and I'm sure you guys saw me laughing, and I'm going to give you a little reason. For those of you who are just joining me, I'm Charles Ellis, and this is Dream Big Dreams. My guest is the author, speaker, trainer, and humanitarian Anthony Hamilton. Well, earlier, Anthony, you and I were speaking, and I was telling you that I came getting ready for the show. My camera didn't work. So I scrambled to the next camera. That one didn't. And so I even had another standby, which is this one, which is why I seem to be a little bit dark. But another reason I'm laughing, Anthony, is because I actually did take your course, you remember, and it was using the Mental Magic Life Planning Workbook.
Right.
But also going along with your courses, I had something that was called, you gave me a morning and evening meditation.
Right.
In that morning meditation, there is a section, a part of it where it says to, and you're watching yourself, and somebody comes up and says something that you didn't expect, or something happens that you didn't expect. And what it does, how you react to it there actually happens later. So I saw myself, as this stuff is happening, I saw myself laughing. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but I saw something happening right before our show. And there were some difficulties going on, and I was laughing. So before the show started, this was happening. This camera didn't work, that camera didn't work, and I was laughing, just like in the beginning when I was doing the morning meditation. And so is that a part of projecting into the future, or getting information from the future to the past, or what happened there? It seems like what you were talking about.
Well, that's true. Everything is connected, right? I mean, we all have the same mind. So, my mind works the same as your mind, the same as all of our listeners' minds, right? Of course, I can specialize in different areas. I happen to speak English. Somebody else might speak Italian, same mind, but the learning is a little different, right? So one of the things that has been discovered recently, and it was discovered in the mid 90s or the late 90s, right, is something called neuroplasticity.
Yes.
Now, neuroplasticity has been around for thousands of years. Of course, they didn't use that term. That's a scientific term.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't have a scientific evidence for it or scientific proof of it. So they called it pseudoscience or hocus pocus or, a fantasy, right? But there's a guy named, now, one of the things I mentioned that I did some research, and what I did was I read all these books, right, on personal growth and mind power and success and that sort of thing. And so some of the books that I read were books that were written around 1850, 1850 to 1920, 1930. One of the latest ones that most people probably have heard about is a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That was written in 1937. But there's a whole series of books going back, like I say, 75 or 100 years before that, called, metaphysics, right?
Mm-hmm.
They called them metaphysics. And it was about trying to combine the ideas of science, which was relatively new at the time, right? And the ideas of psychology. And one of the ideas was, and this was written in a book. Now, there's lots of people wrote about it probably, but one guy that wrote about it was somebody named Wallace D. Wattles. If you've heard of a book called The Science of Getting Rich, which people can find on YouTube or Amazon, he talks about it in there. And he says that whatever talent or ability you want to develop, you can develop it. And as you exercise your mind to develop this ability, whatever it might be, you will be changing your brain. Now, that's neuroplasticity, right? That's exactly what neuroplasticity is. But of course, the scientists, they said, well, that's crazy. You can't change your brain, because they had no evidence for it. Well, in the mid 90s, 1995, roughly, they used something called a functional MRI. And they were able to look at the brain as it was thinking. And what they realized was, wow, guess what? Your brain actually changes every time you learn something. Your brain is literally changing and forming these connections, which become automatic, right? Think of somebody playing the piano. At first you have to struggle to get your fingers right, but after a while, everything's automatic, and you can be carrying on a conversation at a party, playing music if you can play piano, and everything happens automatic. Well, that's how the brain works, right? And he talked about this in his books that were written around 1900, right? Over 120 years ago. So this exercise that you're talking about, where you listen to a recording and you imagine yourself in the future in a meeting or in a situation, and something happens that you didn't expect, and how are you going to react? How are you going to feel? This is what that morning visualization says, right? It says, how are you going to feel about it? And so decide right now how you're going to feel. So you obviously thought, okay, I'll just think of it as being funny and I'll laugh at it, right? Now, when you do that, and here's the secret. You see, this is the secret. How many people have been talking about the secret? Thousands, right? Millions. Well, here's the secret. Repetition. See, if you listen to that morning visualization once, probably not much would happen, right? But if you listen to it every day for 30 days, and what the scientists have found is that's kind of the magic number, after doing something 30 times, and you don't have to do it for a long time, a couple of minutes is fine, but doing it every day for about 30 days starts to really change these neural connections in your brain. So when you listen to that recording and you imagine yourself getting surprised by something, and rather than getting angry or frustrated or losing your temper or something, you just take a breath and you laugh. You learn how to do that, and after a while it becomes automatic. So now when you try and use your camera and it doesn't work, rather than getting frustrated and throwing it across the room, you sort of chuckle and say, oh, that's funny, it's a funny thing. So that's something that you have learned, right? Now that little process of being surprised by something and then laughing at it, that's a part of your personality now. Whereas before it might have been just a thought, right? So that's the magic of what they call spaced repetition, which is something I learned when I was in my late 20s, researching success. And what I did was I took a course from somebody named Paul J. Meyer, and his course was all about setting goals, writing down your dreams, writing down your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions, and having plans. Yes, sir, there you go. And having this series of ideas about what it is you're trying to create for yourself. And again, it's the same thing. You use that workbook for 2 or 3 days, not much is going to happen, but you use it every day for a month or 2 months or 3 months. And as you've experienced, your brain starts to change, your thinking changes, you start to get these aha insights, right? That eventually you get to the point where you figure out what it is you want and what you can do to get there. The same as driving downtown. I have a route in my mind. I just follow that route and I get to my destination downtown. If it turns out that sometimes, like a few days ago, they were working on the road and the road was blocked, I just took another street. I just took another path. So that's what you're enabled to do when you start exercising your mind, exercising your brain, and you have a system, which this binder is, for writing down your ideas and keeping track of your ideas. And the way I think about it is like an architect. An architect would design a building. He might start off with just a little sketch of what kind of building he wants to design, but then eventually he's going to have a whole series of detailed plans with every door, every step, every nail, every screw, every piece of wire, every light bulb in the building. And that's what we can do with our future. We can design it and we can create it And it's not difficult. You just have to have a strategy and a plan, and you have to work at it consistently, and your life will change.
Absolutely. And, you know, Anthony, and I found that those challenges do come up, but doing the planning, and especially when you're, the repetition, as you say, it becomes fun. It's like life is a wonder, and you're learning new things and you're experiencing new things. And
it's obvious to everybody who knows you, is you've decided to find things to be grateful for.
Absolutely.
And again, it's changed your brain. It's now an automatic thing that your brain does. You just realize every day you have so many things to be grateful for. And of course, the more often you do that, the more things you have to be grateful for. And your brain changes, your body changes, your brain chemistry changes, and your life becomes a great adventure and a joyful adventure. And you're grateful for it because you decided to develop that attitude, right?
Yes.
And anybody who has learned a skill, whether it's another language or whether it's mathematics or whether it's learning how to draw or, anything like that, learning how to play an instrument, they've experienced the same thing. So it's learning, deciding what you want, and expecting that your brain will change and your consciousness will change, and you'll start to see things that you never noticed before. Right?
Yes.
I mean, it really is kind of amazing. There's a line from the Bible, I think, not that I'm a Bible scholar by any means, but it says the kingdom of God is spread all over the earth, but people don't see it.
Wow.
And it's like, you could say the same thing, right? Reasons to be grateful are spread all over your life.
Ooh.
But most people don't notice it, right?
Wow.
And the interesting thing about this mind as a time machine idea is you can find things in the past to be grateful for.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, and you might have done this exercise where you think about something in the past that normally when you think about it, it causes you pain or sadness or some kind of uncomfortable feeling. And if you say to yourself, well, what in that experience do I have to be grateful for? You'll find something, seek and you shall find, right? So if you find something to be grateful for in that past experience and you think about it, and again, think about it over and over again for a while, that past experience changes from a source of pain into a source of pleasure, or at least less pain,
Yes.
And so this is one of the key ideas in my book, that you can change the past.
Wow.
Anything in the past that was negative to you, you can shift it around by shifting your attitude and your perception and your beliefs,
Right. Anthony, I want to ask something else, because I don't want to skip this and I don't want to forget about it.
You're in charge. You're in charge.
I know. But going through your book and going through the course and speaking to you, I came across and I was given and introduced to mental magic. And can you actually, expound on that? I know there are 5 laws, you say, of mental magic. So what's mental magic and what are those 5 laws?
Yeah, well, when I was studying, and I said, I read hundreds of books over a course of, 20 years, and of course, probably hundreds more since then, looking for the secrets of success, right? And so what I finally figured out, and there's a book out, it's called The Success Principles.
Yep.
And I think it outlines 125 principles, persistence and ambition and courage and, all of these things, right? But when I was researching, I thought to myself, well, this is too many, right? There needs to be some framework that we can synthesize and understand in a simple way what these principles of success are. So I came up with this idea of magic because it is magic, right? I mean, when you think about when you first had the idea that you were going to write a book, and now you have a book published and people are reading it and enjoying it, right? You're earning income from it and you're getting clients from it. That's magic, right? I mean, you're turning your ideas into something physical in the physical world, right? And so I thought magic is a great acronym. So if I could come up with 5 of these principles of success that I could call magic, use the acronym MAGIC, that would be a simple way to understand it, right? So I thought, okay, well, what's the most important one? Well, the most important one, obviously, is goals. Because if you don't have a goal, if you don't know what your goal is, you're never going to be able to get there. If I didn't know where I was driving my wife to this morning when I took her to work, I'd never get there. I'd be spinning my wheels all around town, right? So obviously goals is number one. You have to know what it is you want, right? And you have to have a system, like I say, like an architect, for figuring out how those goals in all different areas of your life, 6 different areas of your life, how those goals fit together, right? So MAGIC was obviously goals, right? And then I thought, well, I is imagination, because the imagination is the time machine. When you close your eyes and imagine the past or the future, you're using that inner time machine that we talked about. So I was imagination. And M is clearly motivation, because, what I realized was that there's 2 kinds of motivation. There's motivation by other people, which is, somebody saying to you like, hey, if you do a good job this week, I'll give you a little bonus in your paycheck. That's motivation by incentive. And the other motivation is by fear. Hey, if you don't fix your performance this week, you won't get a paycheck. But both of those forms of motivation are external, right? It's somebody outside you telling you what you need to do. And the truth is that nobody's going to motivate you to achieve your goals. They're only going to motivate you to achieve their own goals, right? Your boss is going to motivate you to do something because it's going to benefit him, right? So what you need to do is we all need to become self-motivated. And that's what the M in magic stands for. It's motivation, right? We have to learn to be self-motivated. We have to learn to motivate ourselves to accomplish our own specific goals and dreams and things that we want, because nobody else is going to push us to do it, right? We have to push ourselves. So M is motivation. And then A, of course, has to be attitude. I mean, that attitude is king, right? Yes. Learning how to shift your attitude, whether it's an attitude that says, there's more things to be grateful for today, or an attitude about a past event that says, there was also some positive learning in that painful experience, and you learn to recognize that there's 2 sides to everything, right? And then, so that's MAGI. And then, of course, the last one was C for consciousness, right? Understanding that consciousness affects your brain. When you think and you use your mind, you are literally changing your physical body. You're changing your brain. And so those are the 5 laws of success then: the motivation, attitude, goals, imagination, and consciousness. And if you learn those and you practice those, and of course I write about those in my books and in my online courses, once you get a grasp on those things, you can use them, for just a minute. You can say, well, what's my level of motivation about doing this today out of 10? Is it high or low? If it's 2, well, you better remind yourself of the benefits of doing it to increase that level of motivation, right? And you can say, well, what's my attitude? Am I expecting positive results or am I expecting negative results, right? And how clear is my goal? Do I know what my goal is? And how clear is it? What's the next step? Not what's the final step, but what's the step from where I am right now? What's the next step I can take, right?
Mm.
And then how am I using my imagination? Am I using my imagination to think of something that can't happen or maybe will hurt or be painful? Am I using my imagination to worry or to create something to fear? Or am I using my imagination to imagine a positive outcome, right?
Right.
And then being aware of my consciousness so that I can sculpt my mind and sculpt my brain the way I want. So you can use those 5 principles in just a couple of minutes, like I just said, or you can really get into them by studying each of them, through the work that I do and through this workbook that we talked about, and become an expert. And the thing is, and you've learned this already in your life. I didn't have to teach you this. When you get some ability with these skills, people will pay you for your advice, right? So you can become a coach because most people simply do not understand these principles that we're talking about, motivation, attitude, goals, imagination, consciousness, neuroplasticity, changing your brain, persistence, the secret of spaced repetition. Most people don't know, even though they've been around. These are not secrets. I mean, there's thousands of books describing these things. But when you actually take the time to develop some skill with these, then, you can become a coach. You can develop a side business. You can develop an extra source of income for yourself. You can start writing your own books, And so people, as they learn these skills, they make themselves more valuable to other people.
Absolutely. For those of you who are just joining me, I'm Charles L. Ellis, and this is Dream Big Dreams. And my guest today is Anthony Hamilton, who's given some fabulous, amazing information. If you're listening, I hope you've been taking notes. I'm taking notes. I always do that. And please feel free to ask questions. There's a chat box. If you have questions, put it in there. Let us know you're here today. I'm sure Anthony will get back with you or he'll be able to answer them. Now, Anthony, before we start getting toward the end, there's a couple things I wanted to ask you, if you wouldn't mind. I think you are working on or you're releasing some more books. I'm always following you, so I do know. But there's a couple of things that really got my attention. It was something called the IQ method, Mind Power Toolkit or Mental Toolbox. Can you speak on those?
Right. Yeah. When I was studying, this goes back, 40 years now, a little more than 40 years maybe, when I was in my late 20s. And I'm putting together this theory of, mind and time and consciousness and that sort of thing. And I decided to quit smoking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because I'd smoked at this time, I remember I was about 28 years old. I'd smoked since I was about 10. I started like a lot of people, certainly like my friends, picking up butts off the sidewalk. So I've been smoking for about 20 years. And at the time, I was smoking like 3 packs of cigarettes a day. So I was a heavy duty smoker. And I had tried to quit several times in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't been able to do it. I'd quit for a week, started again, quit for a month, started again. One time I actually quit for 6 months and started again. And it blew my mind because I had believed, that if I could quit smoking for 6 months, I would have it beat. So when I quit smoking for 6 months and then I actually found myself smoking again, it blew my mind, And I started to think that maybe I'm never going to be able to quit. Maybe this habit or this addiction that I've got is so strong, I'm just going to have to be a smoker for the rest of my life. Well, I thought to myself, if I can't quit smoking, something which obviously was, negative, it was damaging my health. I had a cough at the time. I was spending money on smoking. I thought, if I can't actually do something like this, stopping smoking, that I want to do, that I know is negative, then my life isn't worth living, seriously. So I thought, okay, but I'm not going to quit now because I'm not ready yet, right? So, but as I got more and more into this mind power and I learned, I took some courses in visualizing, using affirmations, repetition, and those kind of things, and actually started to get some great results. I thought, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of these tools, changing a belief, changing an attitude, changing your perspective. What if I did this, and examine different ways of thinking about things. What if I applied some of those tools to quitting smoking? So I did that and it worked. I quit, never smoked again. And, now it's 45 years since I quit, which is kind of a mind blower. And one of the ideas that I discovered was a 1-minute goal. Because I asked myself, well, my goal was to quit smoking forever, right? That was my goal. And I asked myself, because one of the tools that I had learned in my study of the mind was how to communicate with your subconscious mind, just by asking it a question, right? So I asked myself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do I believe I can quit smoking forever? And the answer came back 0.
Wow.
So I thought, well, obviously that's not good. I mean, if I have a goal and my belief in my ability to achieve it is 0, then I'm setting myself up for failure, right? So I said, okay, well, what would I have to do to have my belief to be 10 out of 10, right? So I thought, how much do I believe I can quit smoking for 6 months? Well, the answer came back, 2. Because I had done it once before already. So I had some belief, but it was tough, right? So then I thought, well, how much do I believe I can quit smoking for a month? And the answer came back to me, 4. Okay, so I can see a pattern here, right? The shorter the goal, the more my belief that I could achieve it. So I said to myself, well, how much would I have to have as a goal? Like, how long would my goal need to be? Or how short would my goal need to be, perhaps, so that my belief was 100%, that I felt totally 100% belief that I can achieve this goal. I closed my eyes and I meditated. My subconscious mind said 1 minute. And I remember thinking, 1 minute? What good is it to quit smoking for 1 minute? I mean, I want to quit smoking forever. What's the point of going for 1 minute? That's stupid, But I thought to myself, well, I'll try it anyway, because the truth was, I believed I could go for 1 minute, 10 out of 10, because I knew I could hold my breath for a minute. So what I realized was when I decided to quit that weekend, and I said, okay, I'm going to quit smoking. I threw my cigarettes and everything away. And then I get this craving to smoke, right? And any smokers that are listening, they can identify with this. So I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to stop smoking for a minute. That's my goal, 1 minute, right? So I didn't smoke for a minute. So I took a couple of deep breaths. I drank some water. I got some water here, took a drink of water, kind of walked around my apartment a little bit, and a minute went by, and I'll tell you something, Charles. This is true. In the beginning, man, I remember looking at the clock, and that second hand on the clock was like going like this, and I thought, man, this is a long minute, But the funny thing was, after a minute, it was like, actually, I feel a little better now, right? So I'll go another minute. So I went another minute without smoking. And then I think the phone rang and I ended up getting distracted and, something happened. And, the next thing I knew, it was like, oh, hey, the craving is gone now, right? So what I realized was that craving, not like I had believed before, was like some weight that I had to carry around with me. It was actually more like a wave. It was like an emotional wave that I wanted to smoke. And then if I didn't smoke for a minute or two, the wave would kind of go away, like a wave on the ocean, right? And so that got me through the first day or two. And of course, after a couple of days, then I realized, this battle that I'm fighting here is not an addiction to a drug. It's not nicotine. And I was doing research on it, and I realized, your body gets rid of the reaction to nicotine in about 72 hours. So after 72 hours, the nicotine's gone from your body. There's no more craving due to nicotine. It's all your mental habit patterns, right? So I put together a series of, I won't explain the whole system, but basically this idea of a 1 minute goal, I still use it, like when I'm writing my books, sometimes I think, okay, I want to write today. I told myself I was going to write today, but I don't really feel like it. Well, I'll just sit down and I'll write for a minute,
Yep.
So I'll write for a minute. And a trick that I learned when I was in university studying creative writing was just start writing, and if you can't think of anything to write, then you simply write, here I am sitting at the typewriter. I can't think of anything to write. So I'm just going to move my fingers and I look outside the window and I can see the trees outside, and after a minute or so, you start to, then you're into it. Right. And of course, the first couple of paragraphs or the first couple of pages, you can throw them away. But so this idea of a 1 minute goal changed me. It allowed me to stop smoking. And so I wrote this book. So I called my method the IQ method, right? Okay. Because I'd always learned that IQ was intelligence quotient. And what I realized was it's not intelligence, it's imagination. It's how you use your imagination. So I wrote this book, right? How I Quit Smoking with Mind Power. And so this talks about the changes I went through. And I've already described a couple of them. One of them was, rather than thinking about quitting smoking forever, I decided to quit smoking for a minute. Instead of believing that the problem was nicotine, I realized the problem was my own attitudes and my own habits, And for example, drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes, I realized I'd been drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes together for like 15 years at this point. So I thought, there's a very strong association there between smoking and coffee. So I'll just stop drinking coffee. So I started drinking tea. And what I found was, the association to tea didn't exist because I never drank tea. So by changing some of my habit patterns like that, I was able to control those cravings and those urges to smoke. And the next thing I knew, it was 2 weeks, it was a month, it was 3 months. And like you said a few minutes ago, it became a real fun adventure to get over this smoking habit, which had enslaved me for years. But I realized that the enslaving wasn't the cigarette so much. It was my own unconscious beliefs and habit patterns, which I learned to change. So that's what, so this book, even though it's called Quitting Smoking, how I Quit Smoking, it's really all about changing your focus, changing your belief, shifting your perception, changing your goal to a 1 minute goal, filling out some little cards. I had these 5 cards, getting back to the idea of motivation again, self-motivation. I would write on one card, what's the worst thing I can think of about smoking? Well, it was disease and coughing and spending money. And what's the best thing I can think of about non-smoking? Saving money, becoming healthier, feeling better about myself, And so I had 5 of these cards. One of the cards said, I won't smoke for 1 minute. Another card said, this is the only craving I have to defeat. In other words, this one, the one that I'm feeling right now, this is the one I have to deal with, not tomorrow or the next day or next month, focus on this one, defeat this one. And the last card said, I'm a non-smoker. And what happened was maybe for the first month or so, when I read that card that said, I am a non-smoker, I didn't believe it. It wasn't true, right? And when I thought about why it wasn't true. It's because I thought that a non-smoker never had a craving to smoke. That was my belief.
Mm.
And I thought, well, that's not really logical. Like, I can see lots of people walking down the street who aren't smoking. And as far as I'm concerned, they're non-smokers. So they might have a craving to smoke. They might be an ex-smoker. They might have a craving to smoke, but if they're not smoking, then to me, they're a non-smoker. So I thought the key then to being a non-smoker is to not smoke. Never mind the cravings. I can have all kinds of cravings, but as long as I'm dealing with the cravings one by one and not smoking, then I'm a non-smoker. And when that idea clicked in, and I realized right now I'm a non-smoker, this minute, or this day, I'm a non-smoker, then of course it became true. And that turned out to be the sort of the icing on the cake, when my self-image accepted the fact that I was a non-smoker, no matter how I felt about cigarettes. I could deal with it, right? And it's been now something like 43 years, I think, since I quit. And it blows my mind to think about starting with a 1 minute goal. It's now been 43 years, But of course, I haven't had a craving to smoke now probably for 25 years. But right. I did get the odd craving, 5, 10, 15 years later. I would still get a craving to smoke. And I would just, I would go back to 1 minute, take a deep breath, have a glass of water, and then the craving would disappear.
Wow. Well, thank you, Anthony. We're getting ready to get to the end of our show. For those who are just joining us or recently joined us, I'm Charles L. Ellis. This is Dream Big Dreams. My guest is Anthony Hamilton. Great information. So please write in the chat. If you have any questions, please put them there. Anthony will get back to you. If I have to give him the questions, he will still do that.
Yeah, you can forward any questions to me, George. Charles. I'll be happy to.
Definitely do it. Well, before we leave, Anthony, do you have any words of wisdom you can give for our viewers, and also, how can they get in contact with you? How can they take your courses? Things like that.
Yeah, thanks very much, Charles. Well, I have a website. It's the same as the title of my book. It's mindtimeandpower.com. If you just simply do a Google search for Mind, Time, and Power, or Anthony Hamilton, you do a search for Anthony Hamilton, Mind, Time, and Power, you'll find me. And if you go to that website, you can communicate with me. You can find links there to take you to Amazon, where my books are available, both the book on how to quit smoking and Mind, Time, and Power book. And there's also a link you'll see at the bottom of the page where you can sign up for a free 1-month Mind Power course, which I'll send you through email. All you have to do is fill in your name and your email address, and I'll send you this Mind Power course, and we can communicate that way. So it's pretty easy to find me, Mind, Time, and Power, Anthony Hamilton, and you can find me on Google. And of course, if you're on Google, then you're available to the universe, right?
Yes, and I just want to say, hey guys, ladies and gentlemen, you want to try this course, you want to speak with Anthony. He's full of information. Since speaking with Anthony and working with him, I'm 3 books in, a 4th one coming. I have a course online. I have another course coming out. Be looking for the webinar, which is coming out soon. There's a masterclass coming out soon, among other things. And be sure to watch this on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. And I like to say this, as always, it begins with gratitude, it ends with gratitude, and everything else should be filled with gratitude. So as you go about your day, let that fire loose and you have a gratitude day. Thank you, Anthony, for being here.
Thank you so much, Charles. It's been great.
Wonderful.